RJ Harvey left huge shoes to fill in the UCF running game. Can Jaden Nixon and Myles Montgomery step up?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. Turn us on, turn us up, we'll turn it out. I'm here with my good friend, Andrew Gluchov, to talk a little UCF football, brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks, our title sponsor for today's show. On today's show, we're going to talk about that UCF running game and the huge hole that RJ Harvey leaves, the second round, the draft pick size hole he leaves. Then we're going to talk about the special teams, man. I feel like the special teams is being neglected here, Andrew. So we're going to talk about Pete Alamar's unit and how they can contribute to a good UCF football season. And then we're going to talk about the receivers. Let's start at the top here. Myles Montgomery and Jaden Nixon will expected to be the guys, right? Now, we covered this when we covered Stephen Leonard's projected too deep, as I mentioned, Myles Montgomery there at RB1, and he'll be rotating time with Jaden Nixon. Now, we reported that Tayven Swint and Stacey Gage would be battling out for QB for RB2. Tayven Swint injured. Stacey Gage, though, available. So maybe an opportunity for Stacey Gage to kind of move up there just in case there is an injury. Let's jump right into this. Myles Montgomery got a lot of praise from his coach this offseason for being a leader, being what we have coined and they have coined a culture keeper for the UCF Knights so far this offseason. And Scott Frost, compared him to some big-time running backs in terms of hey, he waited his turn. Now it's his time to step up and do something big. But Jaden Nixon is not to be he did not want to be forgotten in this thing. And now UCF may have a pretty decent two-headed monster in the Big 12 that may not be able to do what RJ Harvey did, but they could be formidable if you underestimate them. I like these two guys. Talk to me about Jaden Nixon and Myles Montgomery.
Well, you don't replace RJ Harvey, you just mitigate the loss.
Yeah.
And that's what Jaden Nixon and Myles Montgomery are going to have to do. Montgomery, the incumbent, transferred to UCF from Cincinnati going into 2024. 51 carries, 293 yards, 3 touchdowns. Was a change of pace guy, but when he was on the field, he was effective. And he forced, so when Harvey would leave the field, the defense would kind of almost disrespect the run a little bit. Well, he forced him to have to continue to respect the run because he was able to get chunk yardage at a time. So Montgomery played a really good role there. He's played for 4 years. He's towards the end, getting towards the end of his career, and that experience, that veteran presence has really helped him grow as a leader in this offense. And he should be, at that coin flip every game. That's the kind of guy you want there. And I said it before, and I'll say it again. It doesn't matter which one of these two lines up first. They are going to get a lot of action. And, Jaden Nixon on the other side, 143 carries, 919 yards as the starter at Western Michigan last year. Spent 3 years prior over at Oklahoma State, was backing up Ollie Gordon, played at UCF. But it took going to the MAC for Nixon really to kind of blossom as a running back. He was used about as much as Montgomery, but didn't yield as good of results. But the truth is, UCF was a better team overall than Oklahoma State. It's not while the result of 45-3 was, amazing. The fact that UCF won the game was not as surprising. They're a good team. UCF's been, a good program for a long time, and Oklahoma State's been kind of trying to, find themselves. But you put those two together, you have 1,212 yards. That doesn't account for RJ Harvey by himself. So you're going to have to find ways to utilize both and in different ways to keep defenses honest, bring them in. And as we talked about in the previous show, use that as an opportunity to go over the top. It's actually okay for the running backs to have less yardage than RJ Harvey did, as long as it's good yardage. You get a decent average, and it's setting up those pass plays that you can convert, third downs, maybe get a big play touchdown or something like that. So as long as the end product gets points on the board, you can survive not having an RJ Harvey quality running back there. But let's be honest, that's not to take away from Nixon and Montgomery. They're no slouches. They're not RJ Harvey.
How many yards do you see for this group, Andrew? Like I said, RJ Harvey, 1,500 yards last season on only 232 carries. He was at 6.8 yards per carry. That's probably the most impressive stat from what he was able to do. Was every time he touched the ball, it was second and short, right? Like that was RJ Harvey. You give him the ball, the next down is second and short. He was a monster. And had he gotten the carries that some of the other backs around him to average over 6 yards per carry, Omari and Hampton comes to mind, or obviously there was the kid out of Boise State. God, his name always falls out of my head. Ashton Genty, yeah. You've got all these guys who averaged a great amount of yards per carry, but only Ashton Genty was greater than 6.8, and he had more than 130 yards. More than 130 carries more than RJ Harvey did. So if you had given RJ Harvey at 6.8 yards per carry another 130 carries, I think he would have gotten pretty close to a 2,000 yard season, man. You can check my math on that and tell me if I'm right or wrong, but he was a monster. And these guys don't have to. I think if they can average 5.5 yards per carry as a group, that would be a really good mark for them.
Yeah, I expect it to be, 4 guys running the ball. Obviously these two, I think Stacey Gage will get some play. And then you have Cam Fancher, who, as a dual threat quarterback, he's going to tuck it and run. That fits a Scott Frost offense, that fits McKenzie, Milton. You're going to see that. And I think it's partly one reason why he ended up winning the starting job, is he can kind of check more boxes than the other guys. So he's going to tuck and run too. That's going to force defenses to respect the run as sets up the pass. So, RJ Harvey had 1,500 yards by himself, and that doesn't include all the yards that UCF had alongside him. I think 13, 14, 1,500 yards by the entire running back core for UCF is a fair amount, because the Knights are not planned to be as one-dimensional as they became last year. Last year, they were so ineffective. If they have to be this one-dimensional, watch out, because they don't have they don't have as that super running back. You got good running backs, but not a super running back. So Scott Frost is going to try and have a little more balance in this offense. The hope is that Fancher in this untested wide receiver room is going to rise up to the challenge. You've got some talented tight ends with Kylan Fox and Dylan Wade. You're going to have to find ways to move the ball. So I think 1,500 yards as a running back group is a fair amount for what the team should get for the season. Yeah,
1,500 yards is what you got.
Give or take, not including Cam Fancher tucking and running for probably a few hundred more yards.
All right. Well, look, I like that mark. I think 1,500 yards as a group is definitely enough to kind of keep them a game, especially if they can get the passing game going. But look, maybe in a perfect world, they get into scoring position and UCF can make some kicks. Special teams is going to be a key in year one for Scott Frost here. If they're going to win some games, everybody expects them to lose. We'll talk about that unit next on Locked On UCF. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Yeah, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind here. Just 1 week away as we're recording this from the college football season. Whether you've got your eye on the big name quarterback or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. This episode of Locked On UCF is also brought to you by friends at Drip Drop. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether it's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. I'm on top of my hydration. I notice everything works better: my energy, my mood, my focus, even my skin. But getting enough fluids every day isn't always easy. That's why I love Drip Drop. Drip Drop is doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3x the electrolytes and half the sugars of a leading sports drink. Look, they've got great flavors. I know my go-to flavor right now. Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners $20 off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com. Promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 up. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Pete Alamar's group is going to have to do some work for Scott Frost here. Looks like UCF starting kicker in 2025, Noah Rualas. Did I say that right?
Probably like Rulis. I got Rulis.
Yeah, Rulis. Yeah, he's a senior joining from James Madison, and he was at UConn before that. And he's stepping into the kicking role for UCF this season. He joined the Knights with a solid track record. He only missed one field goal from inside 40 yards throughout his entire career. That's the kind of reliability I think they're looking for at kicker here. And Coach Frost's new special teams coordinator, Pete Alamar, are banking on this kid being able to steady the ship, man. Like sometimes you take the points, you get off the field, and you keep it pushing. And I can't say this enough. Nobody thinks about the kicker until you really, really, really need him. And when you do need him, you really need him. And when he messes up, man, does it hurt. Talk to me about special teams. Pete Alamar is going to be front and center, I think, this season if UCF struggles to move the ball.
UCF fans know all well how much a kicker at the end of the game can matter.
Yeah.
A win streak against Memphis in 2020 went up in smoke with Daniel Obarski, who was a very inconsistent kicker himself, blew a game. And then you had Colton Boomer last year who kind of, went bust, playing injured, and things kind of fell apart between him and the team and whatnot, and he ended up leaving. So UCF had to replace all their specialists this year. And in the kicking game, this looks like an upgrade. Rulis, was the starter at James Madison last year, with 16 of 20 on his kicks. That's still over 80%, went 35 and 37 from the extra points. So he's had a lot of work, and you need that confidence, at times. You're not going to score touchdowns. So you need a guy that can be reliable within 50 yards. And Rulis is very reliable within 50 yards. I believe he only missed one kick under 50 last season. So, I mean, that's pretty solid. I can take a guy, missing a kick over 50. But if you're pretty much automatic within 50, you're good in my book. Now, the other side is the punt game, and UCF had to hit the reset button there too. Yeah. Punting is even more overlooked than place kicking. Anthony Veneri is looking to be the guy. An Ohio State transfer. He redshirted for Ohio State last year. Didn't play. Had 2 years prior as the punter for Buffalo, averaging 43.5 yards a punt over those 2 seasons. So that's consistency that UCF's going to need. Mitch McCarthy at times was a little inconsistent, but I mean, he was generally a good punter. You look at the UCF record books for punt average, and he's in the top 10 easily, McCarthy, but he's no longer there. So Veneri's, coming in. Veneri's only a redshirt junior. And so he's got a little, he's got a couple seasons left in him, which, we want a little bit of continuity. In the case of place kicking, looks like Ruel is going to be, or Rulis is supposed to be likely a 1 year. He redshirted in 2023. His junior season was last year at James Madison. So as a redshirt senior, and then you got your return game where, I would expect Jaden Nixon to be the guy. He did returns at his previous other spots, at Oklahoma State, Western Michigan. So I expect him to be very active in the return game at UCF. All those roles, very important. We saw last year where bad decision-making in the return game cost UCF. That happened, I believe it was against Arizona State, with the being down at the 1 because of a bad return. And then a very quick pick 6. UCF can't afford that. They can't make those really unforced errors. So having a savvy veteran like Nixon at the return game would be very valuable for UCF too. So I think UCF did a good job of retooling the special teams after losing everybody. And we'll see how they do come game 1.
Yeah, look, man, make kicks, flip the field with the punter. That is the name of the game. But as we mentioned in our previous segment, all eyes are going to be on Cam Fancher, but they're also going to be on the guys he's throwing the ball to. So we'll talk about that unit and whether there is a breakout star in that group right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Open Phone. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table, guys. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customer. Open Phone is the #1 phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? Open Phone solved that instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this. And the AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads, so you never miss a customer. See why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's openphone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open Phone, no missed calls and no missed customers. Is there a 1,000-yard receiver in this group? As we mentioned, we covered Steven Leonard's projected 2 deep. So I want to talk about that group here at the wide receiver X1, DJ Black. Could it be him? Andrew, could it be Chris Domercant at wide receiver X1 as well too? Or is it Marcus Burke, the Florida transfer, at Y1? Might it be Waden Charles at wide 1? At the slot, Dwayne Thomas Jr., and Jordan Bridgewater at the slot too. Definitely wondering how much 10 personnel we're going to see from Scott Frost here in year 1. But I suspect they'll be running some 11, getting a tight end in there on the field like Dylan Wade, and those guys, Kylan Fox as well. Is there a breakout star in this room? He has been damn right giddy about this wide receiver room. He thinks that they have a ton of potential. He likes this group a lot. They performed well in the spring and the fall, and Scott Frost has not been shy about saying it to the media. Now, whenever he singles out a group like this, my antenna goes up because he's not giving – it didn't sound like coach speak to me. He hasn't been praising other position groups. Like, he was pretty clear that no quarterback was pulling ahead of the pack. He praised Myles Montgomery, but it wasn't as over the top. I think as he's talking about his wide receivers, is there something here to what Scott Frost, his tone about this wide receiver group that we should be paying attention to?
I don't expect a 1,000 yard receiver, but this is a group that's going to surprise you. Dwayne Thomas Jr., the transfer from Charlotte, a talented player, has that FBS experience. The guy I'm actually really excited to see is how DJ Black, transitions from Division II play to Big 12 play. Very talented guy himself, and is, as you showed, fighting for a starting spot. The other play, Wade Charles is a freshman. Chris Domerkamp was a later entry as far as joining the team, but has looked very consistent. And Marcus Burke, he's an excellent blocker. I think he's going to really help with other parts of the game. But I don't see a 1,000 yard receiver that, in college, it doesn't happen all that often. Not as many games as the NFL. So I don't think any of these guys, any of them star that much where the passing game is going to really allow it. Maybe next year when you have a little more, reliability in the passing game, I'll be very surprised. But as far as the leader in receiving yards, I would not be surprised if it's Dwayne Thomas, the Charlotte transfer. Right? He checks the boxes. That slot is going to be a very useful area because you're probably going to have a lot of quick passes, and that works well, coming across the middle in those slants where you can utilize some speed, and then you have the tight ends coming across to cause a little bit of chaos. And I think you'll get some good yardage that way, or even just, use them down the middle in a nice post route or head towards that corner and just, drag the safety with you. I think they'll find creative ways to utilize the slot receiver, but Dwayne Thomas, Jr. is my guy for most yards, but I don't think anyone hits 1,000.
So Andrew putting his money on Dwayne Thomas Jr. I think it's DJ Black. That's the guy I'm putting my money on in this group here. I like this group. I think they have a chance. Now, to say to predict a 1,000 yard receiver, I think you need a 3,000 yard quarterback, and that's probably going to be the biggest hindrance to these guys reaching that mark this season. But if the quarterback surprise and the passing game works a little better than people anticipate, if there is a breakout star, it will be because UCF is breaking off big plays in huge chunks down the field. Hear me out on this one. It's going to be the 40+ yard passes that puts a guy over in a system like that. If maybe completion percentage is not where it needs to be, but they're hitting the big plays when they're there, that's how you get a guy to 1,000 yards in this system in year one. It's the big play. Can you, I think my closest comparison to that for kind of like a dysfunctional passing game that still kind of worked was Auburn last year, right? They did not struggle to hit big plays. They just couldn't put the ball in the end zone. And they had a guy come up like 13 or 20 yards short of 1,000 yards in a year where everybody criticized the pass game nonstop. Now, there's some marked differences between Auburn and UCF, but I do think that, if they can hit the big play, you could see one of those guys surprise. Can these quarterbacks see the field, see the open guy when he's there, and deliver the football on time down the field? It's going to be super important for Scott Frost and McKenzie Milton in year one. Either way, we'll be here to talk about it all. Andrew Gluchov, I want to thank you for joining me. Senior writer at UCFnightzone.com. Please go check out his work there. You can check out my written work there as well as our contributor, James Duncan. Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Your first listen of every single day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at The Portal Show. Our guy Brian Smith has the latest in portal signings, rumors, all the going-ons in college football right there in one place. You can find The Portal Show on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find us here next time on Locked On UCF.